Chris is on the line with us listening in Mark and I's hometown of Sarasota, Florida. Hey, Chris, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey, how's it going, guys? How you doing?
Welcome, sir. You're on the air.
Thanks. I just was calling. You guys have a pretty interesting show that I happened to come across on the radio. And, I think you guys bring up interesting points, and these are the types of things, that kind of need to be talked about just amongst people. I just want to commend you guys, first of all, on doing
Thanks.
that. As far as, like the conspiracy theory stuff, well, initially, I wanted to say, sorry, a point. It seems like in technology with all this stuff, social media, it connects us, but it doesn't really, connect people to people. You know what I mean? There's more interaction than ever before.
Absolutely. I remember I was biking by a local pub recently, and I saw a couple sitting outside, and when in any other circumstance you'd expect them to be talking to one another, it looked like it could have been a date. They were just sitting there on their phones, and it's not
that day was going badly.
It's not uncommon for that to happen, though. Even whether it was a date or not, or just two friends sitting at a table together. You see that a lot, and I'll when I see my friends doing it, I'll say something like "phone party" just to kind of bring attention to it, to the fact that people
we
are
call
doing
that cupcaking.
Cupcaking?
Yeah. So Amanda Billy Rock.
Is that a millennial term or
well,
something?
yeah. Amanda Billy Rock told us about it. So her little sister said it to her. And she's downstairs one time, and we're all just hanging out at the Quill. And she says, because I think it was Riaz or something. Was
these are activists in the New Hampshire area?
Friends
of
ours.
Knows.
Yes.
Go ahead.
But we're all hanging out at the Quill, a bunch of activists. And one of our friends, Riaz, was on his phone. And she said, Riaz, stop cupcaking. And we're like, what's that? And she said, apparently cupcaking is when you text on your phone in a social situation.
Where do I get this name?
I don't know where they got that name either.
Now this is officially a thing because I said it on the radio.
Chris, what else did you want to share tonight?
Yeah, along with the conspiracy theory stuff, it generally comes under, having a bad rap or being crazy. And, it's kind of difficult to get away from that. Just even the word conspiracy theory has a sort of, stigma to it. But
you're a nut. That's when immediately that's
exactly.
what the suggestion is.
A lot of them are nuts. So it's understandable
Carl
why people think that.
Yeah. Interesting. Carl Sagan, he said, scientists aren't necessarily inherently smart people. They just question things. And I think that's what it comes down to. They're just skeptics or flip-siders. They just kind of wonder what if things are not what they seem. And
there's a difference between being someone who questions what they're presented with and another who makes up a kind of a theory, right? So that's the difference between questioning and theorizing and sort of filling in the gaps. It's one thing to say you don't know what happened or you don't know the truth about what happened, and it's another thing entirely to say that you believe this is what happened, whether or not there's any evidence or whether the evidence is credible that supports those claims.
Yeah, and from my perspective, though, it's tough because you get both sides of the story. People are just so adamant about, this is true, why don't you believe it? And then there's other people that say, why would you question that?
Which is why I don't waste my time with it generally. I totally agree with you, by the way.
It's tough to ever say, yeah, I believe that or the other. It's kind of, unless I see or I was there, it's really hard to ever, make up your mind.
Absolutely.
But, listening to you guys' radio station is the first time I heard about the conspiracy theory with this whole ISIS beheading video, and I haven't seen.
First time I'd heard of it too. I hadn't watched the video until tonight.
They pop up with every story, like you guys said a minute ago with the last caller. I just wanted to say, as far as what you guys are doing, keep it up because
we
need a lot of
Glad you're out there.
communication between
Thanks
people.
for the call tonight, man. I appreciate hearing from you. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE.
That must feel so good when people call in and they tell you how much they love your show.
No,
really,
it makes us uncomfortable.
I get tired of it.
I'd much rather talk about issues, honestly.
I don't want to get praised up and down here.
I think there's way too much of that on the radio. Talk show hosts that
it's terrible. Thanks for your service, Sean, or whatever it is they say.
Let freedom ring.
See, I feel like that's somebody trying to tell you that you're really changing their life.
Oh,
that's what I hear.
That's not to say I don't appreciate it.
The ideas changed our lives, right? And so these are just ideas. Ian and I aren't amazing people or anything like that. These are amazing ideas, the ideas of human freedom.
Really? Because I think you're amazing.
Aw,
Thank you.
Both of you.
You know, it's not to say I don't appreciate it. I appreciate somebody who wants to say, thanks, Free Talk Live. I'm glad you're out there. And we made a promo out of a couple people saying that recently. There's one guy who was talking about how he joined the Free State Project because he happened to find Free Talk Live on the radio in his area of Charleston, South Carolina at the time. And so, yeah, it's great to hear that from people. But if that's all that we did was just hear people talking about how much they like the show, it'd be a really boring show. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. Let's continue with your calls and thoughts. We've got Tyson in New York. You're on Free Talk Live. Tyson.
Yeah, hello?
Hey, you're on the air. What's on your mind tonight?
I'd like to talk about conspiracy theories.
Please.
And I really want to talk about how I think, there's conspiracy theories and then there's, factual information on some of these things. Like, some things could be facts and some things, are a little odd. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 2036, there's supposed to be a meteorite that actually hits the Earth. Now, that's been confirmed by the Russian government. They said that there's a meteorite approaching the Earth. You know what I mean? Like, that's a fact.
No, that's not a fact. That sounds like a theory to me. What makes you think that's a fact?
Well, I suppose it could be a fact that they said it.
Because they said that was factual information. They've done calculations. Now, saying that on the period of time, maybe it will hit, an asteroid belt and get knocked off or something will happen. But,
Or maybe their calculations are wrong.
Here from January the 10th of last year, huge asteroid Apophis will not hit Earth in 2036, according to space.com.
So
Doomsday people.
So how'd they screw it up? I mean, apparently, according to Tyson, the Russian government said it was going to happen.
Well, they thought it was going to happen, and then they decided it wasn't.
There you go. So we shot that one down already, Tyson. Go ahead.
I'm saying that things could be real, or things could also be wrong. You understand what I'm saying?
Tyson, hang on, man. We're losing you there and drowning you out in the music. Toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. Yeah, I think you have to question everything. I mean, whether it's coming from the American government, the Russian government, the BBC, whatever your favorite news station is, you never really know what the truth is unless you've seen it yourself, as our earlier caller pointed out. Free Talk Live. Lucas is with us, listening to Talk Radio 850 in Raleigh. Hey, Lucas.
Hey, I wanted to just say Tyson, I think, was talking about the asteroid that is supposed to come near Earth in 2880. That's a newer news story than the one you were...
28?
2880, that's right.
I think we should be
right.
fine.
It's a long time down the road.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about
That's
that
past
one.
Star Trek.
I'm not
And
real
Buck
worried about that.
Rogers.
We'll figure it out. But look, here's the problem. In science, a theory is something that's heavily supported by evidence, logic, and it's peer-reviewed. In
Gravity.
Conspiracy theory, it's like you said, it's all about, exactly like gravity. In conspiracy theories, it's all about what we don't know, but what could be true. And you'll generally find in the field of conspiracy theories or any kinds of theories about what politicians are doing, those aren't real theories in the first place, is just a lot of speculation from amateurs who don't have any scientific evaluation of any actual data. They're just hypothesizing about what could have happened. I would prefer to think of it as conspiracy hypotheses. And I think this is, as Tyson has pointed out, this has really undermined our ability as a society to actually communicate with each other, because now we've got all these people on the radio foisting things that are speculation as fact, which confuses a large part of the population about what's a fact and what's not, and how you tell what's a fact and what's not. Just because you read it on the internet doesn't mean it's a fact.
Well, now let's clear something up.
Don't you think that the large portion of the population was misinformed even before radio?
Oh, I would agree they were. On the other hand, a large portion of the population wasn't informed by radio of things that absolutely are not true. And that's what's happening now, is that we have people being told that things are facts in giant numbers. Millions and millions of people tune into this stuff every day. And are told that these things are facts. And then maybe a year later, it comes out that, in fact, we know what the facts are, and that conspiracy theory goes away. But the host never comes out and says, well, and I was wrong about that.
Sure.
And so all these
just like
people
psychics who
on us have no credibility to tell us what's true and what's not. And so I think people like Alex Jones, who support this cottage industry of amateur speculation as fact, those people, we ought to pull their radio licenses.
Well,
No license.
hold on. Hold on. That's as far as I'm going to go with you.
Yeah.
First of
Well, there
all,
is no license.
I
right.
gotcha.
First of all, there is no such thing as a radio license anymore. But what you could do is you could
Really?
encourage.
Really?
Correct. There hasn't been
There's
for.
no FCC license anymore?
Yeah,
There's an
has-
FCC license for radio stations.
right. Not for hosts. Not for
That's
individual
what I mean.
hosts.
That's what I mean.
Well, no, there
I mean,
used to
for you
actually
go on
be
the
a
internet and
license
say
for
whatever you
hosts.
want.
Right. Well, it used to be that actual individuals who, to be on the air, had to be licensed. So that's where the confusion
Yeah, it's
comes in.
probably been about 20 years since.
Oh, well,
the
I think we could pull the license from the whole station if they want to sell facts as fiction as fact.
I don't believe
Well, now,
What about
in
Christian channels?
censorship. I don't think that we should throw people off the air because they disagree
Right,
with
why
us,
don't
or
just-
even if they're just
what about because they
completely wrong.
lie? What if they lie?
Well, the
Hey,
way
okay,
to
hold
handle
on.
that.
Wait a second. Okay, you're talking about every religious program in the nation not being allowed on the radio.
I was going to say that. That's really funny. But the other thing is
I don't
that
think you can
even if they
prove
lie,
the truth
look,
or the falsity of religion or God.
I agree with
So I
that.
don't
You
think
are
religion is the issue. The issue is that the facts that we have to deal with, that we're being told that in fact are not facts. We're being told that something else is in fact true,
Okay.
like Barack Obama is an alien. We're not talking about religion. We're talking about stuff which
All right.
Okay,
distorts the
here's
public's
a
ability
few-
to understand anything.
here's a few things that I want to say. First of all, if we did that, we would have to ban education because, as I mentioned
wouldn't.
in my
We used to
latest
do
article,
exactly
hold on,
that.
let me finish. The latest article that I wrote was about the fact that public education is child abuse because they teach children as fact that the government is the best thing for them. Second of all,
They
second
don't
point,
teach that anywhere. They don't teach that anywhere in school. That government is the best.
the
I never
government
learned
is
that
the best
anywhere
thing
in
for
any
people.
textbook
Yes,
I
they
ever
do.
had. I never had that in any textbook I ever
Well,
read.
maybe they've
We
changed
argued in my
since
classes.
maybe they've changed since you were in school, but we've definitely seen some disturbing
yeah, maybe.
school
I work with high
curriculum
school
that
students all the
certainly
time.
yeah we've
Second
seen
of all,
so hold on we've seen some
Where are they
disturbing
teaching
school
that government is
curriculum
the best?
that I'm sorry.
Let's talk about that curriculum then and correct that curriculum. I don't know
Yeah,
what
you're
that
not
has
going to be able to
with
do
the
that. I don't know if you ever
question of
tried to
whether or not
change
we're-
the system, but it's almost a total waste
I
of
want to
time.
see how you're going to prove Barack Obama's not an alien.
Well,
you haven't proved it
now
yet.
hold on a second.
I don't have to prove he's not an
Of course he
alien.
doesn't have to
It's
prove
the
that, Mark.
so
obligation
wild
of the theorist
speculation-
to prove that he is.
No, it's
Wild
not.
speculation
Yes,
is
it
not-
is, Mark. He's absolutely right about
No,
that.
he's
He doesn't
not.
have to
We're
prove a
talking about
negative.
taking people's licenses here for a second.
No,
If
what-
you take somebody's license, you have to prove what they've said is incorrect. You have to prove it as a falsehood before you take their license.
What are you
I
talking
understand how
about?
rhetoric works,
they would need
and I
to
understand that a
support the
person makes a
notion that
positive
there is
statement.
Some factual basis for making the claim, and do they have any factual basis for making the claim that Barack Obama is an alien?
Take a look. The news tends to fall down these rabbit holes on a regular basis. They'll quote some article that
Yeah, they
quoted some
do.
article that quoted some article that quoted some article. You're going to end up, if you
Exactly.
go after every false statement that everybody made, you're going to shut down every news industry in the world.
It's protectionism
Let me
is
just
the
remind-
biggest problem
it's not,
here.
It's not protectionism.
No,
That's
we
the
need to
misuse of the
stop
term
protecting the
protectionism.
American
That's a
public
trade
from
war.
information and let them actually learn to
not what
think for
protectionism is, though.
themselves.
Okay, and that's a good idea, but people don't learn to think for themselves if you teach them ways to think that have them thinking that things that are facts that are not facts are in fact facts, and things that
How
are
do you
facts are
determine
in
what
fact
the
fiction.
facts are? This
This
is
is
the
their
question
responsibility.
This is
we
what
this is something we used to do as a society, and this is what I'm trying to get across to you. We used to have, for example, in radio and television, we had something called the Fairness Act, which required a certain amount of airtime be given to each side of a position, and what ended up
Wait a
happening
minute. That
as a
has to
result,
do with politics. That doesn't have to do with determining
it
facts.
Did have to do, it
Have
did
you
have
read
to-
Atlas
it did-
Shrugged?
It did have to do with determining facts in
Determining facts.
politics, because what happens otherwise is somebody gets on the air and talks for 3 hours straight, simply saying the same thing over and over again, which is propaganda and not
Did they
news.
pay for this
And
time?
that's what happens on radio all day now.
Wait,
I
hold
listen
on.
to these programs all the time. I'm not talking about you guys, but there are other radio programs
yeah, we do
that
it.
are just propaganda and not news.
We take a single position. We take a position that is that human freedom is the best choice in dealing and for people to deal with each other, and we pound that point home
This
3
isn't a
hours a
news
day.
I'm
show.
sorry.
Well,
Are you,
but we pound the point
are
home.
you against freedom of speech? Because
Look,
it
but that's
certainly
not a
sounds
that's
like
not
you
a
don't.
question of
You don't appreciate
Okay,
free
you can
speech.
argue that I don't appreciate freedom of speech, but then you're saying we didn't have free speech until 1986.
We don't have free
Because that's
speech
when
now.
The Fairness Act was in place until.
Oh, I would agree that we
Okay,
did
so
not
you
have
don't
freedom of
think there's
speech
free
when you had
anyway.
essentially.
So what are we arguing about?
Look, until the internet, I don't think we had anything.
Free speech now.
I don't think we had anything like free speech until the internet showed
Because
up.
you want to censor people. Just so that we can make
Depends
sure
on what you mean
that
by- it depends
everybody's
on what you mean
coddled
by
properly.
censor. You are allowed to say whatever you want in the public sphere, but you are not on if it's, for example, radio airwaves that are owned by the public.
Oh, how did the public get these radio airwaves?
We own that.
How'd the public get
What?
them? How did the public get the radio waves? Did
Yeah.
you?
Because the stuff that's right over my property belongs to me. So if the radio airwaves coming into my home, you projected that radio. That's what the law said when they wrote it, and that's why they put it that way.
But you know the law was written by
I'm done with
thieves
this.
and liars and criminals, right?
No, well, no, I want you to keep in mind: is there an infinite number of space on the radio spectrum?
No,
for
but you
stations?
didn't homestead
If I
any
build-
of it
so
that was
if
over
I
your
build-
house.
So if I build my own radio station and that interferes with a government licensed radio station, who loses in court?
I would say that the person with the license, but that's because they'd homesteaded
The person
that
with the license
space.
will beat me and will win in court, and that means I have been silenced. So have I lost my right to free speech because I'm not allowed to start
No,
my own
because
radio
you
station in my
stole
home?
someone else's thing that
Wait,
they've
who's-
already
whose
homesteaded.
airwaves? So you're saying the radio station owns those airwaves?
I would
What's
say they
your evidence
homesteaded
of
them.
that?
I'd say
Yes,
they homesteaded them.
them, or bought
they
them from somebody else
licensed
that homesteaded them.
They licensed them from the government. And if you go read about how the law actually applies to your
I don't
radio
care
station,
about the
it's
law. I'm
licensed.
talking to you about morality.
You
The
don't
law
own
is
the-
written by
You
criminals.
don't own but you don't own the
Thugs.
airwaves.
I
don't
don't.
own them.
I'm not claiming to own the
That's a
airwaves,
fact.
sir. You're claiming to own the
She would.
airwaves.
She would. I'm saying the public owns the airwaves.
No,
and that's
the public
true. You
doesn't
send
own
radio
them.
signals through my body.
Show me the
You're allowed
public.
to send it
Through
so-
your body.
If you can
I'm
own
the
it, then you
public.
should be
You're
able to
the public.
sell
We're
it,
all the
right?
public. What are you
if
talking about?
I'll make sure I don't
You,
breathe any of
the
your air.
government licenses it, but they do not sell it.
The
They
government is a bunch of
license it.
liars and
There's a
thieves that
dramatic
have at their
difference.
behest a bunch of armed people that will do what they say.
Does the government own it then? Is that what he's suggesting? If the government can
They
license
must.
it, then they must
It's
own it.
public.
Right?
The government owns
Does
it.
that mean you own it? If the government owns it, do you own it? And if you own it, how do you get a piece of it? It's Free Talk Live. We have Lucas still with us in Raleigh, North Carolina, listening to Talk Radio 850. And actually, unfortunately, Lucas, Talk Radio 850 stops carrying the show at 9 o'clock. So your friends or family or whoever might be listening there in Raleigh won't be able to hear this hour unless they listen online at freetalklive.com. But I
they
wanted
can get the archive, and you can play it for them if you'd like.
I wanted to bring you back on here. There was a lot of kind of scatter in the last segment with you, and I think what was causing that is there are three people in the studio here, and you were saying some pretty outrageous stuff, and I think people were a little caught up in that. So I'd just like to talk to you for just a moment here about one question I had that I didn't really get to speak on, and I don't think you had a chance to answer. If I did barely get to say something about it in the last segment. You had called in, just a recap for our listeners who are just tuning in right now. You had called in to talk about truth and the media and what's being put out
The
there.
lack of it.
And what's being put out there in a lot of cases is not very truthful. It may even be full of holes. It may be conspiracy theory. It may just be, out and out falsehoods, whatever. You had suggested that if people were doing that on the radio, that the radio stations who were complicit in that should have their licenses pulled. And presumably you would say the same thing about television stations as well. So it led me to wonder, how do you determine what the truth is? Is it whatever the government story is? Because I'm with you in being skeptical about conspiracy theory, and I think you made some good points about that at the very beginning of your call, and then things kind of went off the rails from there. So what is the truth, and how do you determine that?
Well, that's a good question. I'm really glad you asked how we determine the truth because, this is what radio talk show hosts who want to present conspiracy theories ought to begin with. Is how do we know what's true and what's not and fully address that before they move into wild speculation. The way we used to do it as a country was twofold. One is when people presented ideas, they would get a full airing and a review by their peers. So we didn't have just amateurs running around saying whatever they want and claiming that it had the same value as a scientist or a doctor, and the public believes them.
Can you tell
now
me?
we've got this other world.
Can you tell me when this happened? Because I don't think that this really happened. I think that this is a idealized idea that you have about radio. Radio's been full of crap for a long time, and War of the Worlds
how long?
is, sir.
For how long? How long do you think it's been full of crap?
When it hasn't been playing music. And I would also say
Okay.
I would also say that if you're going to hold radio to this level and TV to this level, and I
And the
assume
internet.
newspaper, but newspapers don't have licenses, so maybe you can't hold them to this level. But what about the internet? I mean, the internet is full of
Yep.
wild, crazy crap that makes radio
Right.
look tame. By the are you gonna
True.
send the DHS out to pull everybody's website license?
You want to censor the internet too?
Can I answer the question
Well,
before I have
that's the
several
question.
other people jump in? Okay. So here's what I think. Radio, because it's over our airwaves, this is the way we've treated it in the past, and it remains true that technically those are the public airwaves because they fly everywhere indiscriminately. We used to treat it this way. We used to also treat facts on television this way before it came cable. And once it became cable, the public no longer had the ability to say, well, you owe us something for using our airwaves. It became privatized. And it became possible for people to just present whatever they want and pay for it all day. What we used to do as a society is criticize those people and run them out of town on a rail. And now what we do is reward them and pay them hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, I guess you're
Or
going to have to prove
millions,
this to
or
me.
tens of thousands.
You're going to have to present the proof that that this occurred, that society ran people out on rails when they presented things that were not true.
Okay, well, let's wind the clock back to the 1960s when there were only 4 television stations, for example, and there were only, therefore, 4 groups really doing television news. News was much more tightly regulated in that era, not only by the federal government, but by the news corporations themselves, who viewed the first and most important thing they did as presenting news. And the reason that they thought it was so important to present news is when television stations were first licensed by the federal government, part of their license included a legal obligation to present a certain amount of educational programming every day and to present a fair and balanced, which admittedly we can ask the question about how do you do that. It's difficult to do, so I don't want to get into something deep about the idea that I mean, it's not like I think there's some really clear way to solve the problem of people presenting fiction as fact.
Lucas, you seem to be hearkening back to the 60s or
Right,
whatever,
right.
as though this was this grand time for news coverage. Are you
I'm not
really
saying it's-
suggesting that we were better off when there were 4 choices rather than 40?
What I'm saying is that because we have 40 choices, we are not necessarily better off. And as soon as people begin to
Why
consider
not?
the possibility that because with 40 choices, there's very little oversight from the general public about any of those. So, for example, with MSNBC, it's, 97% watched by liberals. And with Fox, it's, 97% watched by conservatives. And those groups don't have an interest in policing MSNBC and Fox.
I don't
Do
know.
you-
That's-
The other guy.
Do you
They're trying
think
to
that
police
it's
the
the
other guy.
Do you think that it's the general public that needs to be watching them or the government?
It is the general public. The
And
government is
how do you-
can I finish the answer to the question, please?
Well,
If the
it was a
general
pretty
public
simple
is doing
question.
I know, so I want to answer it. If the general public is doing
I didn't
its
ask for an
job,
explanation.
which
I just
would-
wanted to know.
No, I'm trying to finish my statement, and you can interrupt me and ask a different question if you want, but I want to answer the one you asked.
You are
which
very
is, is it the
rude.
general public or the public? I'm saying it's the general public. It's the general public's job to elect good people to run. I know
Oh, Lucas, thank
I'm
you.
sorry, Lucas.
If you
No.
think it's not, how do you think we got George Washington or Thomas Jefferson? We elected them.
I
George
didn't elect
Washington
them.
killed a bunch of people. What are you talking about?
Thanks for the call, Lucas. I did not elect those people. I would just like to say.
would never have elected those people.
And
Well,
I
I don't
didn't
know
elect-
whether I would
I
have
don't want
elected
to
them or
elect
not.
anyone.
Maybe they were better people. I have no clue, but I suspect that
You
George
know-
Washington got elected because he was a very successful general.
You know who I want to elect? Myself over my own life. That's what I want. I want to
You
be president
dreamer.
of my own life.
You are
I
such a
know. I'm a
dreamer.
crazy person for wanting to run my own life. That's insane.
Let's go to Terry. He's in Grand Forks.
Stop breathing my public air.
Terry, you're on Free Talk Live.
I want to make a couple of points about your last caller.
Sure.
Number one, he sounds to me like you're just typical liberal who's mad because talk radio leans to the right, and they no longer have control over it. I want to prove it in a couple points. Number one, the fairness doctrine. The fairness doctrine was just a way to stop people who disagree with the mainstream from getting on the radio, because if you had to match it up, they kept them off the air. Once the fairness doctrine was taken away, you saw what happened to talk radio. Now, whether you agree with the host and what they say is irrelevant. Number one, because it's America, we have a right to freedom of speech. If people get caught up in some of these conspiracy theories and they're wrong, that's their problem for not doing the homework. I don't want the government going back to controlling to who I can listen to on radio.
Absolutely.
Number two,
It's just going to kill radio, and it's going to kill TV.
Yeah, exactly.
He just
Where
wants to
was
drive
AM
everybody to the internet where they're going to have the choices.
where was AM radio, and whether you agree with them or not, what was AM radio doing, and what happened after Rush Limbaugh, one and the other? Once again, whether you agree with them or not, when he went on the air and opened it up for everybody and the doctrine went away, look at AM radio now. It totally revived a dead market.
It did.
You're right about that, Terry.
Thank you for calling.
Good
we
thoughts.
really appreciate that.
Yeah, I do appreciate hearing from you tonight. The toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. You can bring up anything that you want. You know, I didn't want to keep the other guy on for much longer, but I still want to know how you determine what the facts are. Is it only when an expert says something? How do you know that's true?
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.